Our last, but certainly not least topic is going to be, I could say, a cherry on the top and ROCKIT's signature topic, which is the trends. And we're going to have a panel discussion, as you can understand from the chairs being brought in. And I was saying to everyone, like, if there's only one topic you're going to listen to today, listen to trends, because it's always interesting to see what's coming up. And for this panel discussion, we will have a range of speakers from Lithuania and abroad, and also a very special host, that is Andrius Milinavičius, a founding member of Baltic Sandbox Accelerator, who also happens to be a ROCKIT member. So, huge welcome of applause to...
Thank you so much.
Hi. Yeah, we already met.
Here,
yeah.
there.
Whatever you like.
Here.
Always the path of
So
least resistance, I can see.
As well?
So I'll have a little seat as well before we can start. And talking about trends, Andrew, what do you think you're going to hear from all these smart people?
Obviously, it will be a pleasurable discussion because majority of the topics were already discussed today. So it's a challenge for us to find something new, exciting, but as much as I've spoken to my dear panelists, obviously they have some interesting points to bring up. It's going to be interesting.
You're not going to spill any beans and tell us what we can expect?
We will definitely speak about our relationship, about the China, what is happening in Ukraine, all those simple topics that everyone likes, right?
Of course, easy.
Yes,
so let's save the world on this one. All right, well, I will allow you to introduce your panelists, and best of luck with the last very important and summarizing discussion of today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lina. Yeah, applause for Lina for an amazing introduction. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite my dear 4 beautiful and gorgeous panelists to join me on the stage. So first one, Remco Janssen, founder and publisher at Silicon Canals. Please applause for him. Hello, you can choose the seat. You get a chance to do it, first one. Then we do have Akvilė Bosaitė, partner and co-head of Banking and Finance Practice Group at COBALT Legal. Also, please greet her well with applause. Erika Maslauskaitė, Chief Commercial Officer at Nikulipe. Erika, join me on stage also. And last but not least, Gytenis Galkis, partner at 70 Ventures and founding and board member at LitBAN, Lithuanian Business Angel Network. Hello. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you here. And as I've mentioned before, we do have an amazing chance to actually wrap it up. And as it was told before, Fintech Trends 2022, Fintech Scene in the globe. Our agenda said, where should we be watching and what will impact anything that involves money in 2022, from open banking, AML, to AI innovations, or blockchain, which spheres will prosper in 2022? What are the top predictions and trends? And as I've mentioned before, there were a lot of things said before, but just as a warm-up question, I'd like to turn to each of you and ask, what is your general perspective towards the fintech and what excites you the most in fintech? So maybe Remco, I'll start with you.
Oh, what excites me the most personally, of course, is the development in the crypto space. But at the moment right now, we're sort of anticipating if there's a crypto winter or another bull run. So yeah, we still have to see, but that's on a personal level. What excites me the most, I mean, I'm from the Netherlands, so Amsterdam, I think we're competing with you guys over here as a fintech hub. And what we see a lot in the Netherlands, at least, is a lot of strong PSP players, for instance, Molly. I just received on my phone a payment that a client of mine has paid. So that's really nice, you know, some real fintech unicorns coming from the Netherlands. But what we see typically, and what really excites me, is that a lot of the fintech has been more geared towards the consumer, while we're now seeing that there's a lot of B2B fintech popping up. And I'm not talking about banking as a service or those types of things, but we see platforms where businesses can actually use that. For instance, we had an Antler participant. Antler is one of the Nordics incubator accelerator programs, and they had a startup called Sprink, and what they actually enable is B2B PSP payments. So online payments for businesses, which is really, you know, often quite hard and with invoicing and stuff like that. So that's something that excites me.
Thank you. We need to keep something.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the business part of it. But
okay, Akvilė, so what is your take on the fintech and what excites you the most?
Well, you know, since I am a lawyer, so what excites me most
legislation.
is that, no, it's not legislation. It's that, you know, fintechs always are ahead of regulation and legislation, and you know, they are the ones that are driving all the changes, all the, you know, having a big impact on this legal system. So
the speed, right?
Yeah, this, you know, the speed, thinking out of the box, and, you know, thinking of new angles, and, you know, this creativity, you know. For example, crowdfunding, right? You know, just there were a number of crowdfunding platforms, and only afterwards the regulation came.
Especially ICOs in crypto world, right? It was
but,
beautiful.
You know, but you know, for the lawyer, since lawyers are not so creative persons, you know, as others, so it's really inspiring.
Amazing. Erika, you seem to be a very rational person from what I know. So what excites you the most?
Yeah, thank you for the kind invitation. So at least for myself personally, and since I'm representing the fintech company Nikulipe, our focus is fast and growing emerging markets. So for us, definitely the connecting unbanked markets and the speed that that we can enable users to adopt the services they couldn't adopt previously, while connecting the markets and allowing the PSPs, merchants, or the end consumer to have the variety of the possibilities in terms of the services they use. So that's the main thing and the main trigger and driver for me and excitement. And on a personal level, yeah, I'm very excited by the metaverse and NFTs. I think that, you know, that's
you own one?
No, I don't actually. But some friends of mine do, and they promised me to share it as a gift. Let's put it that way. But yeah, the thing that enables and the space that is enabled in metaverse and NFTs and what kind of solutions it's going to bring in the future, I think that's the main admiration thing, at least for me personally.
Great. And Gytenis, so you will be the grumpy venture capitalist on our panel today, right? So what excites you or what disappoints you the most?
I would like not to be the grumpy venture capitalist here, but I think there's always two sides. So one side is short term and the other is long term. So I would really focus on the long term when we're talking about the trends. And what excites me the most is that so many different technologies are starting to converge, and eventually they're also cross-disciplinary. So what it means, so we are talking a lot about autonomous vehicles, but we are not so much talking about autonomous finance. Can it be possible? Can we actually transact without logging into our bank and being secure that no one will hack it, and so on? So I think all of that is there, and how can we work with it? How can businesses run, actually, I'm making a transaction between another person, but I don't need to have all the back office in managing that transaction. How can governments be more efficient? Can we actually offer something for digital nomads, maybe government as a service, where they can travel, live for 3 months in one country and get social security there, live for 3 months in another country and have no citizenship, or some digital citizenships, which would benefit the other governments depending on where the person or his family lives, paying taxes in those countries. So there's so many other opportunities that are driven on how life is actually changing. Some of them are driven by tax avoidance or optimization, but there's incredible opportunities in the long term on how can we look at them and make it a business.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for sharing so many interesting points, even before we start to speak about the trends. So, for everyone to understand, we do want to have this discussion directed towards three main topics. One will be technological progress or opportunities. Then we will be speaking about legislation, restrictions, and interesting things that are happening in the world. And hopefully we will save some time to have few words about the green finances and other sustainable solutions. And at this point, maybe Remco, I would like to start from you because you touched upon very interesting points. And let's begin from the interesting angle that fintechs are usually challenging the status quo, right? They see the problems that no one else sees. They're fast, they're moving forward, they're very speedy, and they create solutions. So, looking from the perspective of the technology and the problems, and looking forward, where do you see the biggest opportunities nowadays? And not only for 2022, let's have a longer distance view.
Well, the biggest opportunity, I think, is and this is a global challenge for the world, is an inclusive economy where everybody has the opportunity to have funds and to actually have money and to, well, I wouldn't say accumulate wealth, but at least have a sustainable life. And what happens a lot is that well, for instance, we have a huge refugee crisis, which also touches on the point of identity management, perhaps. A lot of refugees don't have their passports anymore, and as such, don't have the opportunity to open up a bank account if they come somewhere. But also, even a bit further down that, just the everyday person. People are now investing via Robinhood, and in Austria they have Bitpanda, and in the Netherlands we have Bucks. I'm sure you have a platform here as well. But is that also good? Is that everybody's doing that? It's very risky. But in the other end, a lot of people don't have enough money to live by, and increasingly throughout the world are living on welfare or food supply, food stamps. And is there a way, perhaps, that sort of, I wouldn't say that necessarily it's the role of the fintech industry to solve that problem, but on a global scale we have a huge problem that there's a big gap between the haves and the have-not. And I hope, and this is also more from a personal level as a person, that we really get something, that everybody can live their life and doesn't have hunger or poverty and stuff like that. And that's maybe very utopian, but maybe it's a basic income based on whatever. But we have enough in this world to sustain everybody, yet so many people are impoverished that, I feel that's one of the biggest challenges, and maybe that's also the last part of this discussion, so I hope I didn't scoot that away. But
let's make it as flow as possible, and at this point, Gytenis, what do you think? Do fintechs actually empower the people, or haves and have-nots? Because from my point of view, sometimes I do look at the solutions and I do see the same and repeating thing, that usually technology empowers the ones that already have something. Yeah. And what can fintechs do here?
I think the coin is two-sided in the sense that both lending platforms and access to finance can actually create more poverty for the people that don't know how to utilize it. So that's also a big issue, and to some degree potentially solvable by technology that can make or suggest making proper decisions. But as we know, people are more emotionally driven, so it's hard to make a rational decision. You want to buy an iPhone, but you should probably not buy it, and then your software can say you should not buy, you will not have enough money to eat, then you will need to borrow, and you will be in a vicious cycle. So those kind of empowering technologies should help, while the others that can actually lend because they are able to do so, I think they need to be on balance. But working on your point, I think the key issue of wealth distribution is mainly education. So we have shortage of employees here in Lithuania. We have shortage of employees across Europe, in Germany, everywhere in the developed world that is cash, that has a lot of cash and wants to invest. And there's a huge shortage of talent and people. And there's people who are starving, but are clueless. They cannot write or read. And this is, I think, not a fintech issue. It's more of a educational technology or educational inclusion issue, I would say, or bundled with some other things.
Okay, Erika, what's your point here also? I would like to hear your opinion. So technology empowers people, fixes problems, and can fintechs actually look at some specific point that should be fixed?
And well, yes and no. It depends how you're gonna look at it. But at the end of the day, the technology empowers the change, right? So in our case, like looking at the fast and growing emerging markets, we just see that there is a huge potential in terms of the growth and scaling because of the very early adoption of the technology, like mobile payments and smartphones penetration in general, and penetration of the internet. But sadly, today we still have like a lot of complexities in these markets because people can't use services. They can't, despite of the fact that they have the bank accounts, right? But in order to use like the Netflix or video on demand content or Spotify subscriptions, you just need to go through that smooth onboarding process. And if we see, if we look at the challenging markets, in there the regulation takes place in. So of course, it's not yet there so that the end customer would get the service. And again, coming back to your point, whether technology enables it, it enables it, but in order to assure this smooth process of the processing the payment or enabling the funds or enabling the transactions, a lot still need to be taken care of. And I think fintechs are the ones who are driving the change and trying to change the status quo, basically investing money in understanding the market needs and customers' needs. So let's say Baltics, we do define this market specifically as fast and growing market, but today we just saw the potential that nevertheless users can't very easily to participate in international e-commerce because the local payment methods that are available here are not available on international e-commerce platforms or merchant shops. So that's why, again, we thought that we need to take a lead and create a product for that, create a payment method that actually enables purchasing goods and making and bridging this gap in order to consumer get the things they need. So I think, you know, of course, there's risk in terms of like security, compliance, and a lot of things that are related to technology. But I would totally agree with the point you mentioned, Gytenis, that education and finance literacy in general, the way we understand finance and the way it merges with technology, I think that's the aim and the goal for all of us, being representatives in the industry, just to educate, especially not only the younger generations, but also the ones that are already maybe early adopters, but late adopters of technology. Because I think the frustration, what's happening currently, that they're willing, but are being afraid even to start using it. And then we see what happens and why the super apps, as Revolut, for example, are taking the lead and merging all of the available services to ease in the journey of the user so that he or she would get the end product. So I have the positive outlook on the technology in the fintech, definitely, but I think we just need to merge our forces together. This is why we're sitting here, and just try identify the areas that need to be taken care of, like the digital identity, at least in European Union, IDAS project, right? It's like a headache, I think, and it lasted for so many years just to figure out how to identify the user within the European Union. So I think at least these are the main topics I would focus on. Sorry for the long.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. You
remark.
touched upon very, very interesting points. Does anyone wants to comment? Because okay, let's move on. At this point, we mentioned that technology empowers and gives us solutions and opportunities. Also, technology sometimes creates problems, right? And Akvilė, I'm looking at you because I want to touch upon the money laundering topic. And it is a headache for a lot of central banks and regulators. So in this specific field, do you see any interesting trends happening or opportunities that are just behind the corner and not everyone sees them? That's an easy one.
You know, as with for myself, you know, all the fintech solutions that they bring, including the regulation that is, you know, backing those solutions, it's very, you know, territorial. It has some territorial scope, you know, and AML is a good example, you know. We have a number of clients shopping around Europe and, you know, just looking, okay, what AML, you know, KYC standards do we have, video onboarding, yes, no, etc. So we are moving to the other jurisdiction and, you know, some arbitrage just choices. So of course, you know, European Union, although slow, they are reacting to that, and I think in the nearest future we will have the regulation that will not be a directive and will be universally applicable throughout the EU. Still having, you know, some room for the member states to regulate. So. And here, it's again very interesting on what direction, you know, the EU will take, whether they will take, you know, the approach of the most innovative jurisdictions, or whether they will take, you know, the approach of those, you know, more conservative ones. So this is, you know, the opportunity, of course, you know, Lithuania was always there, you know, if looking from a European perspective, the one, you know, leading the market, and, you know, it's always, you know, video onboarding check and things like that. But I think looking globally, so that's also the opportunity for Western Europe, because, you know, we usually forget that, you know, we have that, but there are so many countries that do not have those, you know, AML KYC tools and possibilities that are allowed in the Baltic states, at least.
So what you are implying is just to copy what Ondato does and go to Latin America and do the same?
You know, Latin America.
That's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's an opportunity, and well, you know, again, we are quite, we have, you know, territorial limits, but looking at some of our clients doing business in Latin America, you know, and in Asian countries, so. Well, it's not rocket science, you know, it's basically they are following what the US develops, what Europe develops, and they are taking the lead. And of course, you know, without having any regulation, most probably, and just navigating, you know, through the requirements that they have locally.
Okay, does anyone of you have something to add on the topic of anti-money laundering? Do you have more opportunities that are still missed? Remco, maybe you have an idea?
Well, the simplest solution to stopping anti-money laundering in the first place is to actually get rid of cash.
You think that helps?
Yeah, I think that would help. And I envision a future where we're cashless anyway. I mean, we had, how was it called, central bank digital currencies, so yeah, CBDCs.
CBDCs, yeah.
And, you know, you see that often when there's, you know, I'm from the Netherlands, we're one of the biggest ports for drugs. So you don't know how many heaps of cash are being, you know, coming through the country. And, you know, all the drugs is being paid in cash, and that money needs to be laundered. And what happens in the end is that they try to put it, well, in a bank account or in a, you know, maybe in a crypto wallet and then transfer it anyway, so that's like, it seems like legit funds. So the first step always to anti-money laundering is to actually get rid of cash, because that's, you know, all criminal activities, or most of the criminal activities, and I think the drug industry is probably the biggest one. Yeah, involves cash, right? So, and the second step with anti-money laundering is, of course, you know, the fact that, you know, we have all these platforms, but yeah, it is kind of difficult because, you know, it is in sort of a way sometimes a little bit of, I wouldn't say, at least in the Netherlands, a racist system where people will actually get flagged because of their heritage or their cultural, how do you call it, where they used to live. So for instance, in the Netherlands, people from Morocco and Turkey actually get flagged for anti-money laundering reasons. And so this is also one of the parts that I can think can fix anti-money laundering is AI. And AI is always formed by humans, and humans are by nature prejudiced. So if we're training AI to help them prevent any money laundering, are we training then AI to actually be prejudiced, and are we doing the right thing? So I think that's the two big challenges, actually cash and having an inclusive system of where AI can actually prevent anti-money laundering in itself.
Yeah, but the problem with AI, we usually feed it with the historical data, and white people
no, exactly.
don't get into jail, right, for anti-money laundering.
Yeah.
They buy themselves out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I just think partly this should not be done by banks. Mainly, mainly the reason is that the government kind of ID'd all of its businesses, all of its residents, and in the end it breaks out to this. In my view, it's a bullshit case, where, for instance, I personally was, like transferring as a fund from the Lithuanian government, transferring money to a startup. The bank requires documents, contracts, and so on. And then you hear this interesting story on the news. Maslauskaitė, without a contract, transferred from Belarus, which is sanctioned, a huge amount of money to the government legal entity. Where were the banks? Did the transaction happen without the bank?
The amount was too big.
The amount was too big. They could not refuse it. Yeah.
No one touches it.
Exactly.
Just go.
So that's, to me, is such a bullshit story. When small transactions are getting flagged, checked, scrutinized, and sometimes the bank even refuses to do business without any purpose. And now Maslauskaitė, without any contract, can transfer the money, and then the government then decides whether they want to do business or not. So if we think in those lines, let the government decide who they want to transact and who they don't want to, and leave the small businesses out of it, or then sanction the small businesses. In my mind, it should go the other way around.
We will ask Gytenis to comment this at the end of the discussion, so how does it happen with this Maslauskaitė? But let's move on. You guys, you mentioned financial literacy issue, right? And education, that I find very important, and it actually connects to my next, not like the topic, but a thing I would like to also briefly discuss about the opportunities or trends. So cybersecurity. Do you see it as a very big problem that fintechs could tackle, and maybe the financial literacy could help? Who wants to start?
I can start. Of course, I'm not an expert in terms of cybersecurity, but if you look at it, so of course we're becoming cashless, and I think, from what I know, 4 out of 5 Americans are using mobile platforms in order to transfer money or funds. So that means that basically you can easily steal those money. And,
so you can take it pretty fast and easy, right?
You can take it pretty fast. And the cyberspace in general, it's not too regulated. And we have a future unicorn in this country who owns the biggest VPN providers, right? So I think in order to protect the environment, especially knowing that the digital environment, and that most of the transactions are being made on the digital platforms, the regulation also needs to be there. And it's very hard to regulate, especially if we look like globally, like Asia, one case, Latin America, third case, then we have like very emerging markets. So the complexity is there. So I think that in order to find the common ground, so the industry representatives, regulators, and all of the stakeholders that are participating in a fintech or in the payments industry in general, and this is why we have many representatives in here as well, we need to create programs or create frameworks that would support the current state that we're in. I think the main challenge, what happened with the big tech companies, that the change happened too fast and that the regulation and the governmental institutions couldn't catch up with the pace. So I think the more we discuss, and if we keep this agile outlook towards things, not to create like a lot of legislations, right, and then to proceed with those, but just quick steps, what can we do in order to secure the status quo? So I think that would be
Yeah, and then we're speaking that we want to get rid of the cash money, right? And then let's put everything on the cloud, and then we do have hackers, and there will be more and more of them. Akvilė, you would like to comment something?
Yeah, so on the regulation side,
Yeah.
you know, there is DORA, Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is being considered
I
now
love
by...
the names, they're so awesome, yeah, Dora.
Yeah, it's like, you know, it's
DORA.
hurricanes, DORA.
Is that the...
That's real, that's real,
Yes,
it
yes.
exists, yeah.
And it's called Laura.
DORA.
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 Dora the Explorer.
It's like hurricanes, you know, just
Okay.
Katrina and things like that. So,
Like a storm, yeah.
yeah, so well, that's coming, but you know, and you know, it will of course broaden the cybersecurity, you know, information communication technology requirements for a number of financial markets participants, including crypto, you know, currency asset providers or exchangers, but. I think the biggest problem is what Gytenis mentioned, you know, that a lot of money laundering, you know, cybersecurity stuff, they are going, you know, through the banks, through the major players who are already, you know, have everything, you know, installed. And the broadening of the requirements for a number of market participants would not necessarily catch the problem. But will, of course, you know, mitigate that.
It's always easy to bullshit with the small ones, yes? Gytenis, you wanted to add also something on the cybersecurity.
More reality, or maybe a question to the panelists. Is Tinder swaddler a cybercrime, or is it a love crime? Because it happened through Tinder, which is on internet, on cloud.
Now, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have all the transactions also online. So you could say it's a mix. And in my mind, it's not that you will get hacked and get stolen. That happens in my mind more rarely than all of those prints that charming come into your email and say, I would like to transfer, but please, before that, transfer me some money. Even today, my colleague received an email from our managing partner to her personal email, saying, please, can you buy me these coupons? As can I ask you a favor? And they started to communicate. Only then she noticed something is wrong. So those things happen all the time, and they're not that cyber. It's just using regular interfaces. And then at some point, like in the Tinder swaddler story, why didn't the bank do a proper job? Shouldn't they ask what's the loan?
So many loans,
yeah, exactly. Right? What's the loan for? Are you buying any assets? Okay, the loans are going to some different account. Who is the account for? Why aren't you traveling yourself? Your phone is here. So there's so many opportunities on how to cross-check, and that's the technology where it could be. But it's still not there because it's okay for the bank to give the loan. They don't really care.
Yeah, but we as consumers want finance to be, you know, seamless and fast and secure. And if we have to wait for our money and you know, have all kinds of checks and balances, then we become annoyed again.
And that has to happen instant. That's where all the artificial intelligence or, you know, algorithms and so on should come in place.
If we broaden it up, so it's called, if I'm correct, it's social hacking. So can technology or fintechs actually help fighting social hacking? Because if the bank would be asking her questions, she would definitely lie, right? And who can check it?
Well, no, but it's an interesting point. But you're saying, I mean, Tinder swindler. I mean, and I was talking about crypto. I'm investing in sometimes in DeFi platforms. So you're doing things on a wallet that is, it's decentralized finance basically. So there's no KYC involved in this case. So and then people are, you know, often the communication is via Telegram. So and this group was perfectly copied in Telegram. I even felt for it, and they're saying there was a $500 airdrop, and I was like, there's no airdrop. And you know, people actually signed up with their entire account details and had their entire funds swindled from them again. So, but even Telegram, which is, you know, even the Telegram platform, you know, it took them days before they even removed the chat. So there's also a lot of especially in the social media sphere and in email and all those kind of companies, they have a huge and Tinder as well. They have a huge responsibility towards, cybersecurity and these kind of crimes, because they enable people to communicate with each other, but also to, haggle money out of people. And I think, if you ask me, that those platforms are not doing enough right now to prevent that from happening. So they also have a huge responsibility towards the public to prevent them from these kind of crimes.
Actually,
there's an opportunity for autonomous finance. So you don't deal with all of that. You have your bot set up for you and your daily expenses. Might be very boring, but maybe that's the future.
It's so funny because it's written biometric security systems and robotic process automation. I have the answer. Guys, but our time goes so fast. I really want to now move to the other topic of crypto and digital assets. So what are the opportunities on trends here? And I believe Erika is the biggest fan of crypto, right? You mentioned NFTs. We can also touch them here.
Well, in terms of digital assets and crypto, I think those create opportunities for different services than we use currently, or enable the scale of the services we use currently. And that gives flexibility, that gives earlier adoption, especially for certain user target audiences. And from my perspective, crypto, again, myself, we're not working with high risk in general, but from my personal perspective, I think that it actually drives the finance industry forward. And it kind of reminds me the same stage where the fintech was previously in general. That it was kind of very frustrating that, oh my God, someone is new here. They would ruin the system. And something is going to happen because it's unregulated, it's unsafe, it's unsecured. So I think it just would require certain time for the right adoption, right? To understand, okay, so what kind of services crypto are supporting, mining, is it good environmentally, is it not? How we can maybe merge certain services together and create a better good. So again, I wouldn't try to be like as much as philosophical, just to make statements out of that. Yeah. But I see personally opportunities in not only the risk, and I think this risk, why it's being identified as a high risk, because we have a legacy with the porn industry and other environments where we're identified as high risk, gambling as well. And crypto very much relates to the darknet, and you can always tweak the story the way you like.
Yeah, but Erika, that's the problems. But we are speaking here about opportunities. So fintechs and opportunities, and speaking about digital assets. So what
I
could
think
be
the
done
main
there?
opportunity. Sorry for the long answer again. I think the main opportunity, just to mention a few, more new products and services. The wider scale of the young audience and fast and growing emerging markets which would adopt the technology in general and crypto as such. And then I think it's also an opportunity for the smoother regulation of the industry in general.
Obviously, Remco, what are the things that could be solved using crypto in fintech world?
What? Sorry, what again?
What are the things that could be solved? What are you missing in your life?
What am I? Well,
$1 million of bitcoins, yeah, right?
Yeah, no, and I was quite early with Bitcoin, but what I think
really, how much?
Not enough. No, but the thing is, what I think one of the most interesting startups I ever saw, and it wasn't necessarily crypto, but it was blockchain, was a company, and I can't remember the name right now anymore, but they were the winners of the Blockchain Innovation Conference 2018 in the Netherlands, and I'm pretty sure they still exist, although I think they rebranded. And I touched upon that point, is that they provided identity management for refugees, for instance, right? And I think this whole, the blockchain is being undervalued. Everybody's now talking about crypto as a way of, get rich quick scheme, right? And that's not what it's about. It's about, transferring and storing information decentralized and quickly. And we haven't even started using that in a real way. I mean, even if you look at supply chain, you know, checking up on, you know, where do the goods actually come from, you know, or, you know, you can, I mean, the possibilities are limitless, but all we're talking about is, hey, did you get into Bitcoin early? And I think that's what we should be talking about if you're talking about the crypto space. We shouldn't be talking about crypto, but about the possibilities of blockchain, really.
Gytenis, do you imagine a real traditional legacy bank actually jumping on the blockchain train? And maybe that's an opportunity for the fintechs to look at.
I think it's way too early to say.
Okay.
I so far cannot say that I'm quite deep into understanding how all of this works or what trends should be there or shouldn't be there. I still believe it's very, very early days, and there's of course emerging technologies, there's technology improvements that are happening. But to me, I think the whole blockchain and crypto and NFTs are highly dependent on regulation. So in my mind, I personally see most of the opportunities in decentralizing or having those, let's say, notary removals or something like that related on the government's intention to actually digitalize and digitalize it through this technology rather than the technology moving in, because there will always be resistance, and how to come closer to that and answering whether banks will use it. Most likely they will use the technology when it's profitable to use it, and when the regulator agrees that it's a good technology or they can do it in a certain way. So I would say not in the nearest future.
Obviously, the offline and online worlds should play according to at least similar rules, right? And Akvilė, now I would like to turn to you and touch few maybe points. First one is NFT. It's a madness, yeah, majority of the people say. And it's actually tightly connected to our traditional world rules. Well, we do pay for the rights, right? They're like authors, they're creators that do have to get a fair piece of it. And what is happening now, I can't say that it's happening like this. And also, if we expand it to the crypto regulations, and there is this thing called MiCA, Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation. Could you briefly maybe explain to the ones that are maybe sitting here, I believe everyone knows that, but what are the opportunities that lie within of this regulation, and maybe we should get or start getting ready, and what should we be ready for?
Yeah, so I think, you know, for the cryptocurrencies, the biggest problem is that they are now, you know, just off border. You know, there's something illegal, something, you know, unregulated.
Well, you can carry it in your pocket, right?
Yeah, but you know, just from the regulatory perspective, basically, you know, the position of the Bank of Lithuania that financial institutions should abstain from crypto, you know, and the sanctions if they are not. So the MiCA regulation that you mentioned, of course, it's only the first step, but you know, from the regulatory perspective, I really encourage, you know, putting the regulation and legislation. Erika very nicely said that, you know, the same with fintechs, basically, you know, once it becomes regulated, you know, it's accepted not as something evil, you know, which should be, you know, staying aside, you know, but it's something that it's already there. Let's acknowledge that. And, you know, let's regulate, but regulate to a normal, reasonable standard, you know. And MiCA, what, you know, now it drives into that, you know, okay, those, you know, stable coins, they are deposits, so let's regulate them as, you know, deposits regulated by banks, you know, with millions of equity requirements and number of staff, you know, and things, and various procedures to be in place if you want to do that. So I think that's not the approach, you know, that should be taken, because in that way, we, you know, just you again saying, okay, we're allowing them, but in reality, we're not. So, and I really, you know, would like to see how the discussions on this draft regulation will go through, you know, and what will be the reaction of the market. So, but it's the really big opportunity, you know, just to regulate this crypto, you know, NFTs to a certain reasonable extent, to permit them, and, you know, just and to avoid, very, scary stories, somebody investing, via Tinder or something, in crypto, and, just...
It's going to be even easier, right?
Yeah. So basically, I think that's the biggest opportunity. But of course, we should remember that, historically, political powers, like all states, they used cash as their, power. The one who is issuing money has the power. So politically wise, it's really very big step, that, okay, let somebody issue cryptocurrency not regulated and not linked to some, at least, state power or political power.
There is a saying, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they what? They become afraid of you. So in this point, then they regulate you, right? So that could be the story. Oh my God, our time is going so fast. Just a short question, CBDC, do you like the idea?
I like it, but I think there was the question this morning about stable coins as well. I think CBDCs only work if it's some sort of stable coin, and if there's also an incentive to have them. So the nice thing about stable coins is that you can stake them, and then you get an annual yield. And because we now, interest rates, I don't know what the interest rate here is, like say the commercial interest rate for an average consumer?
2 to 6, right? Something up to 6%.
No, if for savings account.
Oh, 0.
Almost 0.
0.000.
At some bank accounts you pay hardly anything. So if we can get that back for everybody, just have a normal interest rate with that, then I think there's a future for CBDCs. Otherwise, yeah, why not use cash the way we're using it now, but then in a digital bank account? I don't see any huge advantage for that anyway.
But wouldn't it be the same as peer-to-peer lending then?
That's exactly my point. So
yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah, no, but then you can use CBDC, for instance, as petty cash. So you can have everyone can have a CBDC app where you have like 50 euros or 500 euros maximum, and it's just cash because you really own it. And stablecoin is more something that's centralized owned, where there's more like a bank kind of institution that actually owns those funds and has the liquidity to back it. But otherwise, yeah, I don't really see any future for that.
If you would be a fintech founder, or let's say a creator that is searching for idea, would you be looking at this topic, or let's leave it alone for at least 10 years before it will actually be something real?
I think it's too difficult at the moment. I think you should wait another 5 years. Yeah.
Oh, would you?
Will not do this prediction.
Okay. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do see what happens with those who make predictions. They end up presidents. Yeah. Okay. At this point, let's move a bit distant from crypto and etc. And maybe even let's move away from Europe, guys. And let's speak about the opportunities and maybe possibilities and maybe trendy topics that are happening, for example, Africa or Latin America. What is happening there? What's your perspective? Maybe the fintechs should be looking at some specific regions because of some amazing possibilities. Because EU, of course, we will be fighting about legislations. We will create state-of-the-art solutions, right? USA and Canada, they're very close. We're just combined. We're doing similar things. But what is happening there, Remco? Maybe you're a bit aware of.
So what is interesting, if you're talking about CBDCs, what they're using in Africa is M-Pesa, which is basically on the mobile phone network, which is a very easy way to authorize on non-smartphones to authorize transactions and to do, let's say, micro and meso payments. So let's say, for instance, energy or, energy is all prepaid there, right? Well, at least in a lot of African countries. And they're using M-Pesa for that. So, they have a very simple technology on very old-fashioned phones, and I wouldn't say it's working seamlessly. I haven't tried it myself, but it is a way to scale something on a large level without using actual cash. And so sometimes the simpler is better, right? And we're always thinking about very difficult things, and sometimes it's just about easy to transfer wealth or funds in a simple matter. So that as long as everybody respects that, then you have a system. And sometimes you don't need more than that.
Yeah, it's very funny because we used to be looking at Africa as something that is like 50 years behind us, right? Now we're speaking about them. They made a giant leap and they don't need the cash money or something like that. Erika, we were talking with you that you were also like looking at Africa as an interesting continent to look at.
You know, it's not about like looking specifically at Africa, just looking in general, fast and growing emerging markets. So I think I would not be the first one to say that it actually is one of the markets very much hot in terms of population, even because in Africa we have like 40 different countries, which means different regulations, different political state. Furthermore, if we look at the way how old population is, so it's the youngest continent we have on this planet Earth. What that means that, at least from what I know, that by 2025, I think the participants or users in e-commerce in Africa are gonna be like 500 million. So when you compare with Europe, those are like the very much potentially, in terms of the growth, very much triggering numbers. So the potential is there. And if we look that it's the youngest continent, that means the adoption of the mobile payments in general, it's very, very high. So demand is there. But what we see while looking on the fast and growing emerging markets in general, complexity is there. So in order for the user to receive the service on international merchants or to meet the global merchants or international merchants or payment service provider needs in the fast and growing emerging markets, it's very much a challenging thing. So, and also it's not only dependent on the technology only. Regulation is there, the different behavior of the user in terms of the services they're gonna use, or in general speaking, what kind of partnerships might be established. So, you know, from many companies were founded, many fintechs were founded first reaching out Africa as a region. So I think this is definitely one of the continents to look at. And again, what inspires me or excites me, how young the population actually is. So I think, yeah, it's definitely
Just
one of...
Speaking about the young people, like that's something good to have, right? I read somewhere that Nigeria alone produces more people than European Union combined. That's a frightening number. Gytenis, are you, or would you be looking at emerging markets, and what opportunities do you see there?
Of course, yes. However, our fund is based out of here, so
if you would be building a new one.
I think you need to be on the ground, or at least better understand what's happening there. So, yes, if a startup would come with a good sense of understanding how to scale in the emerging markets, of course, we would take a look and consider them. But that's also a bit tricky. There's not so many of Lithuanians who actually do business there or who went there. So I somehow, from the general knowledge, believe that most of it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is partly dominated by China and Chinese technologies.
Not really. At least from what I know, there are a lot of presence of the Western companies. Not only, well, I wouldn't define it as Europe because again, UK and Europe, those are present as well. But maybe in terms of the scale, yeah, Chinese and the Asian market is present definitely.
Amazing. And guys, since we're already out of time and we have touched upon only 40% of the topics that were already... Yeah,
I would say 10%.
It was a pleasure. And Remco, maybe I'd like to start from you, and let's just wrap it up by saying maybe, okay, I don't force you to say 3, but I'd love to hear like 3 main trends that you would offer founders or, I don't know, startups to look at in 2022, because you do think that they're super important and they're just missing out something.
I think I already touched upon the most important point, and that's inclusivity. And inclusivity can mean anything. So it can mean either poverty or all kinds of things that touch upon the inclusivity. So I think that's the most important one. And the other trend, of course, is that you need to have a good fintech where you can pre-order a beer if you're on stage, because everybody's waiting for that as well, and me as well. So
I'll also feel bad about it.
I think that's a really important one.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Akvilė, what are the most important or interesting trends that you see around yourself?
I would say, holistic approach for regulation, meaning, that combined all the rules, all regulations.
If someone does a stupid shit in USA, we should be able to catch him here in Europe, right?
No, it's basically no, it's not that. It's basically what I was talking about crypto, and all various regulations permitting the business to do their job, regulating but to a reasonable extent, and combining that under one roof and not having separate tranches going somewhere else.
Okay, Erika.
I would start from the same main topic, inclusivity, definitely, and then I would name maybe a few: convenience and efficiency. Maybe the fourth, accessibility, might be also the case. Again, I think all these four apply for all of the areas in the fintech that we already discussed. But I think at the end of the day, the main goal for us is to connect the end consumer to the global e-commerce or the digital environment whenever you are. I mean, if you're dealing with NFTs, crypto, or the cross-border payments. So it applies to everyone, I think. And I think agility is one of the things that I would love to mention. I think the more time we spend on things, discussing, rediscussing, aligning, of course, it's a very regulated industry, but we're just losing the potential, especially of parts of the world that are not still connected and are willing to be participants of the industry we are in.
Beautiful words. Okay, Gytenis.
Yeah, I will try to be short. So I'm a strong believer of globalization, despite the facts that are happening today next to Ukraine's borders. I also believe that people being digital and they can be digital nomads. So even if an unpleasant war breaks out, I think talent will move where it's favored. And I would like to see in at least the democratic parts of the world that people can move without borders. And this is also now being a bit complex in sense of all the regulation and technology not being implemented. So if I'm traveling to a country, they should know I came here and many other things. So there's a lot of improvement that fintech, governments, insurtech, and many other technologies could improve. I also really believe in robotization, and that at some point 80% of people will have basic income and can survive on the basic income. So I think a huge trend and a huge opportunity is to think of how robots will be taxed and how this will work out for people, how people will own businesses on top of their basic income, or maybe some of them will decide just to live in metaverses. So there's a lot of opportunities around that, and how to structure basic income, how financial models will work with that, and the governments will support.
Yeah, thank you for that. And metaverse was the topic that I left if we will not have any Q&A questions, because that's the topic we can continue for an hour, I guess, or at least a day. At this point, I would like to maybe also say a thing, and I'm super inspired after today's full program, full agenda, but because only few people mentioned the word profit when speaking about fintech. And I'm super even more inspired that we mentioned inclusivity so many times. We did mention poverty tax and all other topics that it seems we do see as a very big problem. 2 years ago, no one cared. Today, we're speaking about it, and maybe tomorrow, this year, next year, and I also would like to double up on geopolitical issues. But maybe technology doesn't have borders, right? It has legislations, of course, but it doesn't have borders. And maybe if we are on the same level, and if we do understand, like, it's enough to empower the powerful, maybe the very big change and a very good change will come to life. So at this point, I would like to thank you guys, and let's see if we do have some questions from the audience.
May I, before we go to the questions, say something? So I'm always a huge fan of science fiction. So, and if you look a lot of science fiction series and movies, you know, and then you will touch upon these points. So this is basically democracy, financial independence, and the way that we actually transfer cash. And you know, I urge everybody to watch, you know, things like Star Trek and those kind of things, and to see actually how they deal with it in the future. And so hopefully we will all be free people, you know, with a universal basic income that can just live freely and happily ever after. And if that's something that we can do with fintech, then I would be, you know, I would be a very happy person, right? So this is the very utopian way of looking at it, but it is something to keep in mind for us. Maybe it's in 20 years, maybe it's in 100 years, but it's something we have to work towards too.
I'd love to challenge you, but we have no time.
No, of course, sorry about that.
Okay, so, Lina?
Thank you, guys. There are questions about the metaverse and the embedded finance and seamless transactions and so on. But I'm actually, after the remark about the beer, I'm afraid to ask a question anymore. So perhaps people can grab you over the beer and ask those questions.